Hi, my name is Dwayne Gathers, and welcome to CivitasLA, featuring diverse and emerging leaders who make up this dynamic region and are creating community every day and building a better tomorrow. These bi-weekly conversations enable us to hear from, learn from, and be inspired by a new generation of civic entrepreneurs who are forging a path forward in making our region a stronger, more resilient, and connected group of citizens. Our goal is to elevate civic discourse, foster community connections, and promote civic knowledge and engagement across the greater Los Angeles region while elevating diverse and emerging voices in that conversation. In a recent Los Angeles Times piece by Gary Klein dated August 11th, entitled, "Along for the Ride, Fans Hit New Gear," he writes, 6 years ago, upon their return to Los Angeles after a 2-decade absence, the stands at UC Irvine for Rams training camp were a sea of other NFL teams' jerseys. The Green Bay Packers, Dallas Cowboys, then Oakland Raiders, and San Francisco 49ers seemed omnipresent. No more. The Super Bowl effect was in full effect during the Rams' recent training camp, which concluded. As we prepare to kick off a new National Football League season on September 8th, we are delighted to be joined in studio this afternoon by Kevin Demoff, Chief Operating Officer of Super Bowl 56 champions, the Los Angeles Rams, to talk about the role of sports and community, and specifically their return to this region and the sustained investment they've made not only in their organization but in this community, and the remarkable success they've achieved in just 6 short years. And certainly for CivitasLA, we're especially pleased to welcome Kevin as we mark our 75th episode of the podcast. So with that, Kevin, welcome to CivitasLA.
Thank you. It's an honor to be the 75th guest. It's the highlight of our Super Bowl offseason. It's not the parade. It's not the trophy or getting the rings. Being the 75th episode of CivitasLA is going to be a high watermark as we prepare for September 8th and opening against the Bills.
Well, Kevin, we are delighted and we are certainly honored, and it's a very gracious statement of yours. So while the Rams, which is the oldest sports franchise in our city, needs no introduction, we always ask our CivitasLA guests for a short personal introduction. Kevin.
So Kevin Demoff, Chief Operating Officer of the Los Angeles Rams, born and raised in Los Angeles, so second generation Angelino, which is pretty rare, I think, these days to be fully immersed. 14th season with the Rams, 7 in St. Louis. This is my 7th season. Now it's hard to believe this is the start of our 7th season back in Los Angeles. Nearly 20 years in the NFL. I got my start in professional sports in the Arena Football League with the Los Angeles Avengers back in 2000 with Casey Wasserman. So it's been a great journey to get to where we're at. Really proud of what our club has achieved. When Stan Kroenke set out to bring the Rams back to Los Angeles, it was with the idea of making Hollywood Park the world's preeminent sports and entertainment destination, having already hosted a Super Bowl. Safe to say we're well on our way. College football playoff this year, bidding on FIFA World Cup. We're going to be the opening and closing ceremonies for the Olympics in 2028 at SoFi Stadium. And then overall, just what the team has accomplished, what the organization has been accomplished. Stan's goal to all of us was do not undershoot Los Angeles. This is the greatest sports opportunity in the past many decades to reimagine the NFL back here in Los Angeles. And what better way to do it than LA's oldest team, the Los Angeles Rams.
Now, Kevin, that's outstanding. And before I go further, I'm just going to digress because I recall meeting you for the first time about 6 years ago when you guys were just new back to L.A., and we met at a Dartmouth Club of Los Angeles event where we both shared an alma mater. So tell me, how did an L.A. boy find his way to the plains of Hanover?
You want to go as far away from Los Angeles as possible. So I think that was about as far as you can go. You may have run out of at least the United States. So, growing up in Los Angeles was wonderful. It's great to be back home, but I always wanted to see the world outside of Los Angeles. I always felt those who kind of grew up here needed to get away, for a second, just to better understand and appreciate the city. And I will say, coming back after college, leaving for 13 years, and then coming back a third time has really given me a true appreciation for all the city has to offer from in terms of diversity, business, opportunity, and just being a great place to raise our family.
Well, you must have appreciated because you went back for business school. So I'm curious, any lessons learned from your time in Hanover or at Tuck, particularly, and how that's followed you into the world of sports management?
So I was a history major in college, and really never took an economics course, never took anything around business. I went to two failed startups, an internet startup, 1999, in the height of the boom bust cycle. I was the 30th employee in. There were 300 employees when I left. 9 months later, they were out of business. So, one of those true boom bust cycles. Then I went to the Arena Football League, which really went through a boom bust cycle as well. And having left both of them, really decided that I needed to go back and get a business education to understand why these businesses weren't working that so many people on the outside thought would be successes. From the inside, you saw both the good and the bad. And without any formal business training, I thought it'd be great to go back and get an MBA. My wife and I met at Dartmouth, so it was great for us to get a chance to go back there and spend a couple of years and journey out in the world from there.
Now, outstanding. So you just mentioned that this is now your 14th year with the Rams, and so you've had a front row seat from the journey from St. Louis back to Los Angeles, but you said you're from Los Angeles. So I'm just curious, as someone who born and raised here, had the opportunity to work for this particular franchise, what did winning the Super Bowl for you mean personally last year?
Well, I thought it was a great validation for our entire organization. And when you get into sports, you win and lose as a group. And from the journey to bring a team back to Los Angeles, to try to do that for the number of years we went through that, to bringing a team back to really struggling in 2016 as we found our footing, to the success the team's had the last 5 years, the best record in the NFC, the second best in the NFL. But to win a Super Bowl in the stadium that you helped build and dream of, in the city you grew up in, the first Super Bowl in nearly 30 years in Los Angeles was a truly awesome moment.
That's amazing.
And standing on the podium, watching our players hold the Lombardi Trophy, watching Sean McVay hold up the Lombardi Trophy as the youngest coach ever to win it, watching Stan Kroenke hold up the Lombardi Trophy, was just something that gave you goosebumps. Looking around the stadium, seeing your family, your friends, and the city come to life. And really, I would say the 2 weeks in between winning the NFC Championship game over our bitter rival, the San Francisco 49ers at home, and then watching Los Angeles come to life really post-pandemic for the first time for a major event. The city shone its brightest for those 2 weeks. Unbelievable weather, which we couldn't plan for, but everything else, from number of visitors to the most people ever to attend an NFL experience at the convention center, just to the overall game day and the glowing remarks we received from all of our guests and how quickly I think the NFL would like to come back to Los Angeles. It put our city back on the global stage for hosting the world's greatest events. And, I think for growing up here, for remembering what the 1984 Olympics were, what some of those Super Bowls were like, to see those events come back to Los Angeles, to be part of our stadium and to get to play a center role in not only hosting but winning as well, it's a dream come true. We said back then that if you wrote a Hollywood script that had this in it, people would reject it for being, ridiculous on its face. And to see it come true for all 300 people in our organization who worked so hard to make it happen, to reward Stan Kroenke for his ambitious bid to come back was fantastic.
Yeah, that's outstanding. Kevin, you talked about the return and what it meant to you. But as you know, before we dive into our conversation, we always like to get a sense of your Los Angeles through our lightning round. So this was an opportunity for us to get to know a bit about you and get a few of your insider hotspots for you and your family in Los Angeles. Are you ready?
This is a tough one, but sure, we'll go. Okay.
Give us a favorite restaurant or two.
Two favorite restaurants, really hard to narrow down. And when I saw the notes, I tried. I'll go one on each side. Ospi on the west side in Venice for Italian.
Yes.
And then All Day Baby in Los Feliz for kind of breakfast and lunch.
Never mentioned. We'd love to hear that. Give us a favorite place to take a sip, whether that's a coffee or tea, a cocktail perhaps, a glass of wine.
I will say it is hard to beat anywhere overlooking the ocean for a sip of coffee or alcohol, right? To do that. Favorite coffee place throughout the city is Go Get 'em Tiger.
Yeah.
But, and then any rooftop, any beach overlooking, taking in the advantage of Los Angeles when you can get up and see the water or see the city. Those are the best ways, I always think, to take a sip when you're relaxing.
Excellent. Give us a favorite place to take a visitor, other than SoFi Stadium.
SoFi Stadium and Hollywood Park, both count, right? Favorite place to take a visitor, the beach, or I would always say a hike somewhere in the Santa Monica Mountains where you can see the ocean.
Okay.
Show off the best of LA, best and worst. Go grab a breakfast burrito, take a good hike, overlook the ocean. That's a great place for visitors.
Well, and that segues right to the next question, which is favorite place to hike or a favorite park?
Favorite park besides Hollywood Park, right? I gotta throw that in. Any of the hikes, Temescal Canyon by the waterfall, and then Los Leones and Pacific Palisades. You get into Will Rogers State Park. Any of those are favorite hikes. They're easy to do, quick, good for the family. Favorite part? I mean, I don't go to Griffith Park all that often, but still large, the best.
Yeah.
I remember growing up and going to Travel Town or the zoo or any of those places. So that has to be it for me. Although I think my family would say Descanso Gardens. So
which has been shouted out several times on this podcast. So excellent. We love the fact that post-pandemic people are coming together again for community events. Give us a favorite community activity or event.
Oh, well, that one's easy. Walk United, which is the Rams partnership with United Way, raising money, walking around SoFi. It's a 5K in November that goes around Hollywood Park through the stadium and ends in the stadium on the field. So, a great cause, raising money for the United Way, helping to fight homelessness, social injustice, economic injustice, educational injustice. So if anybody's listening here and wants to go to the United Way page of the Los Angeles Rams website to sign up for Walk United, it's this November 12th.
We will post that in the show notes for sure. Thank you for that. So, Kevin, let's talk about the return to Los Angeles. Obviously, we talked about Los Angeles Rams being the oldest franchise in the city, I believe starting in 1946 here. For 20 years, the team was in St. Louis and came back in 2016. Can you share a little bit about the process of considering and executing that return back to this city?
Sure. How long's the podcast? We can want to go 2-3 days. I mean, I think the long and short of it is you look back, the Rams played in the Coliseum from essentially 1946 until the late 70s, moved to Anaheim Stadium in a lease dispute and a chance to go grow revenue, and basically were in Anaheim for nearly 2 decades. When Anaheim Stadium fell behind kind of NFL standards and the team was looking to grow revenue, they had the opportunity to choose between Baltimore and St. Louis. They went to St. Louis for 2 decades, had a really good run, and in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was a clause in the lease in St. Louis because St. Louis had lost an NFL team before when the Cardinals moved to Phoenix that required St. Louis to keep the Edward Jones Dome, which was the new stadium they had built for the Rams, to be in the top 25% of NFL stadiums. And that was to be measured every 10 years. In 2012, we went through an arbitration process where the city of St. Louis and the Rams tried to determine what that would mean. Ultimately, what it meant is the city of St. Louis had a choice. They could either make $700 million of improvements to the Edward Jones Dome to bring it in compliance, or the Rams could become a free agent and go year to year on their lease. The city of St. Louis chose to make us year to year on our lease. At that point, we were free to start looking at opportunities elsewhere. And the fact that Los Angeles still didn't have a team 20 years later, it was an obvious market to research, to understand what the potential was. But what you really had was this breakdown over the years, and anybody who's lived in Los Angeles saw from Farmers Field to the Hacienda to Irwindale to, Ed Roski's project in the City of Industry, so many ideas for an NFL stadium come to fruition, but there was always something missing. And you had a real estate developer, you had the team, and you had the NFL. And there was too much risk and probably not enough reward for all three parties within it. And so what you had was Stan Kroenke, one of the nation's preeminent real estate developers and one of the nation's preeminent sports owners, was someone who could combine the real estate developer and the team into one. And when Hollywood Park ceased to race, it became a great opportunity and subsequently became for sale to take 300 acres in the middle of the west side of Los Angeles and build the world's greatest sports and entertainment complex. So really starting in 2014, we began that process. The Chargers and Raiders developed a competing process in Carson in 2015. And then in January of 2016, the NFL owners voted 30-2 to choose our project and to give the Rams the chance to come back home after 20 years. And really, I think, restore a terrific opportunity. You talked about the Rams being the first professional sports team in Los Angeles before the Lakers had moved from Minnesota, before the Dodgers had moved from Brooklyn. And I think a chance for us to rejoin that pantheon of Lakers and Dodgers as the top teams. But the NFL had never had a modern stadium in Los Angeles. The Rose Bowl and Coliseum are both 100 years old.
Right.
As of this year, had always been looking for that opportunity. And Stan Kroenke really had this belief that you could build the world's greatest stadium in Los Angeles, and it was a little bit of if you build it, they will come. And here we sit 6 years later. Along that journey, still a long way to go.
Sure.
I think to recoup that footing that we had in the 50s and 60s and 70s, but a number of winning seasons, and truly I think the world's greatest stadium later with SoFi Stadium, we're well on our way.
Well, certainly winning does help, but certainly I think there was a lot of excitement about your return, and I believe you had a lot of loyal fans still with a Facebook group of 60,000 plus folks involved. So after such a long departure, how have you guys gone about re-engaging with those old fans and developing new fans in this community?
Well, it's really a two-pronged approach, and maybe even three-pronged. The first was we were fortunate to have a huge following of fans who grew up with the Rams in the 50s, 60s, 70s. There was a Facebook group, Bring Back the LA Rams, which was terrific. We had a practice out here in 2015. They showed up 10,000 strong,
wow.
Which showed the NFL the power of our fan base. Anytime you went through the data in 2015 when the NFL did homework on the LA market, the Rams were the number one preferred team. Usually 60 to 70% of the fans preferring the Rams to come back. And a lot of that was the support we had in Southern California over decades. When we played in San Diego in 2014, it was, I think, their first true sellout in many years, filled with Rams fans. And that was a great indicator to us of the support we had back here. So you wanted to tap into that support. And anybody who had been a fan through the 20 years in St. Louis was a great group to have it. I think then you had a whole host of NFL fans who were just curious about bringing the NFL back. And when we came back to the Coliseum and took waitlist deposits, that second day back in January of 2016, we had over 60,000 deposits roughly in 2 hours.
Amazing.
And 70,000 people on the wait list. But I think, as we struggled through 2016, we went 4-12. We were last in scoring. The Coliseum was still the same building the NFL had left 22 years earlier without any improvements. We really threw off those people who were just curious about the NFL coming back and had to begin the process of developing our own fan base. And I think the article you referenced from Gary in the LA Times about where we started, which was curiosity, to where we are today, which is a fervent fan base, has been years in the making. And it's really twofold. It's going after youth, those kids who are growing up now who can grow up with an NFL team, which is the first generation, really 2 or 3 to be able to do that. And then trying to reconnect fans of the NFL to change their habits. And, this is such a city of transplants. When you think about Los Angeles, people who grew up here, there are people like me in their 40s who grew up here. The Rams and Raiders left when I was a senior in high school, here. But anybody who was born in the late 90s, early 2000s grew up without a team.
Sure.
Grew up watching football, playing fantasy football, watching on Sundays, maybe adopting, another team. Anybody who moved here in those years probably kept the team. If you moved from Chicago, you probably remained a Bears fan. You moved from New York, a Giants, Jets fan, so on and so forth. And so our process has really been getting those people to adopt the game day ritual of going to the stadium on Sunday and becoming Rams fans. And it doesn't have to be that you give up your fandom, of another team, especially, if you're an AFC fan, we can become your NFC team. If we're your kid's favorite team, we'll become your second favorite team. And certainly winning helps. Playing good offensive football where people can follow us and play fantasy football. When you think about Todd Gurley won people a lot of leagues in 2017 with his exploits as offensive MVP. Cooper Kupp did the same thing last year when he won offensive MVP, won a lot of fantasy leagues. That builds fandom, and then SoFi Stadium, people coming, seeing it, understanding that, and then really getting in the community, building that loyalty, even with people who may never be able to go to a game at SoFi Stadium, may never be able to go see an NFL game live, getting them to become Rams fans, getting them to buy into our vision for Los Angeles, for the community, for our team. It's a slow and steady build. And, 6 years in, we've made a lot of progress, but this is going to be a decade-long effort to really rebuild this fan base, to grow it from, not from scratch, but really, what we had before can sustain us a little bit. What we need to make this project successful long-term is, 2-3x of even what we're doing now, in my opinion. So, when I look at the Lakers and Dodgers and their long history of fandom, there's no reason that shouldn't be our goal or better, but it's going to take decades of consistent winning, consistent community outreach, and consistent investment in our product and our fans and playing in one of the world's greatest stadium to get to where I really think we should be.
Well, speaking of the consistent investment that you say is required, certainly with SoFi Stadium as its center, this really is but one piece of a larger economic development puzzle, which is really quite fascinating to me, given my economic development work experience. 300 acres, 8.5 million square feet of entitlements. So share with us this community within a community that you all are building that includes residential, retail, parks and open space. Share with us, this whole aspect and the timelines for that.
Yeah, sure. So, Hollywood Park is really, as you said, a city within a city. And you look at 300 acres, it's bigger than Disneyland. It's bigger than most college campuses. it is a huge undertaking. I think at one point it was the largest private development in the United States. Hollywood Park may still be, but when you imagine it, people look at SoFi Stadium and understand that 3.1 million square feet, the largest stadium in the world. Then we have a 6,000 seat music venue attached under the same roof, YouTube Theater, which has hosted a number of concerts, events. It hosted NFL honors, Super Bowl week. From there, you go into, we're going to bring about 500 apartments online, later this winter, early Q1 of 2023. Close to 1 million square feet of retail will open as well. Wow. Movie theaters, restaurants, bars, shopping, local retail will come into place. There we just opened last, I want to say a year and a half ago, the NFL Media's headquarters, which is right across from SoFi Stadium, which is a 250,000 square foot building, which hosts all of NFL Media, bringing together under one roof. Hopefully going to break ground in a few more office buildings. But you talked about, the initial entitlements for 8.5 million square feet of development. Ultimately, over time, that can go to 15 million square feet.
Wow.
So when you think about adding 15 million square feet, hotels, more office space, more residential, more retail, 25 acres of lakes and parks for Inglewood residents to walk through on a daily basis. You are talking about what I would say Playa Vista meets The Grove meets LA Live, all combined into one in a mass vision. And, I think most importantly, too, when you think about the growth of our project, I think, it'll take decades until it's probably complete, probably the cost of, 15 to 20 billion when you look at the total investment. I think you then look at the investment, I would say at LAX, 20 to 30 billion dollars, into the airport by the 2028 Olympics. You combine those two, what's going on at the car rental center and some of those. I think the front door to Los Angeles when guests first arrive will see a $50 billion, refurbishment, in this decade, which I think will truly change the way people enter and experience Los Angeles and will help set our city apart for decades.
And speaking of that investment in the city of Inglewood, early in our podcast journey, we had a 3-part series, episodes 17, 18, and 19, where we focused on Inglewood and talked to a number of civic leaders about the transformation taking place in that particular community. And as you can imagine, some of it was very favorable, some of it was not so favorable, largely due, of course, to the presence of the Rams and the SoFi Stadium. And now, of course, the Clippers are on their way to the community. And how has the collaboration with the city of Inglewood been, and how has the relationship with the community evolved over time? I heard something that you spoke about some years ago, talking about the need to deliver on behalf of the residents. How has that evolved?
Well, I think it starts with, we were fortunate when we looked into the Hollywood Park process in, 2014, the Hollywood Park Today project, which had been Stockbridge and Wilson Meany, had spent 8 years basically getting entitlements in community engagement to build a 240-acre development around the racetrack when it closed. And when we bought Hollywood Park from that group, we essentially adopted, nearly all of that plan and combined it with a stadium. But we also were really fortunate to have their connections in the community to be able to go build those relationships with local, civic leaders in Inglewood government, with the residents, with the churches. And I think it got us off to, a great start. Our initiative required us to include Inglewood residents in the construction project. I think a third of the construction workers and people who worked on site, nearly 17,000, were Inglewood residents or the surrounding, districts. Close to $1 billion, I believe, at the end of the day, in women and minority business investment into the stadium as part of that. I think when you look at something like Super Bowl 56, we had 256 local businesses in the community in South LA and Inglewood that helped participate in bringing Super Bowl 56 to Los Angeles and reaping, those contracts and those rewards. So I think a ton of spending and investment infrastructure in local business has been a start. And that's one of the continuing legacies that come with SoFi Stadium and Hollywood Park. I also think a significant investment in the school system. I think back to a couple of different things, building a playground, kindergarten K through 5 school that didn't have, outdoor space, partnering with American Airlines on that. Kelso Elementary School, which is right across the street from our stadium. We've spent a number of time with those students and those teachers. I look at Inglewood High and Morningside High, refurbished football fields, locker rooms, new jerseys, new equipment that have gone into those schools. A ton of investment into the school district really in Inglewood and making sure those students know that they matter. I think about SoFi partnering with us to deliver 20,000 backpacks on opening day and 2020, Jared Goff going in and redoing school libraries during his time, here in Los Angeles. You look at Andrew Whitworth and his commitment to the community and what's happened in Watts and, Grape Street Elementary through our partnership with City Year and some of those elements, a ton of investment in education and infrastructure. I think all of that, has certainly helped raise the profile of Inglewood, attract. It really started with Madison Square Garden opening in 2014, redoing the Forum and making that an amazing concert venue. Now with Steve Ballmer building Intuit Dome across the street, Inglewood has become the hotspot, I would say,
Sure.
certainly competing with LA Live for sports and entertainment in Los Angeles. Obviously, that has come with a huge interest and investment in Inglewood from a number of other people. And I think, we can speculate the good and the bad of that. I know I look at it from the Rams perspective, from a SoFi Stadium Hollywood Park perspective. Our tax dollars are nearly double the tax base in Inglewood. Our staff make a point to eat at local Inglewood restaurants, to shop at local Inglewood businesses. I look at our Juneteenth investments the past few years, which has been direct investments into Inglewood communities and Black-owned businesses. But there's a lot of work to do to balance the good that comes with bringing sports teams and stadiums and obviously raising rents and, all of those people who feel they may be being pushed out of Inglewood. And I think that's a partnership, certainly that comes between us and local leaders. It is hard when you watch people who come in after the fact looking for profit.
Sure.
To gauge that with, our group that came in at the beginning, and looking to raise the profile, how that balances. And I say this, true. I think SoFi Stadium was a huge catalyst. I think Inglewood was a natural growth place, in Los Angeles, any way you look at it, whether the stadium had been built or not. If you look at the growth of Culver City and Playa Vista, and Venice, and then you get to the South Bay and the way that has grown, the investment around the airport, even Westchester, all of that. I think Inglewood would have seen the natural investment. I am certain that we help spur it and make it go faster. But it's wonderful to see a community like Inglewood start to thrive again, but we have to be part of the solution to the challenges that come with that as well.
Sure. And certainly it appears that you all have developed a very extensive community outreach and engagement effort under your Rams Foundation leadership, whether it was the Watts Rams or City Year. Speak to some of these initiatives and how do you measure the success of them? But more importantly, I imagine that a lot of people want to partner with the Rams for a lot of different reasons. So how do you go about vetting initiatives that meet your objectives and community objectives?
Well, I think when we came back in 2016, we tried to be really strategic in where we could lean in and make a difference. We had won Philanthropic Organization of the Year in St. Louis. This was something that was in Stan Kroenke's first year of ownership, something that was very much near and dear to his heart, to giving back and to being part of that. And when we came to Los Angeles, it's such a huge region, so many deserving charities, communities, ways to get involved, that you have to narrow your focus to some degree to start to get a foothold and to really, you can go, not only a mile wide, you can go 30 miles wide and 3 centimeters deep.
Yep.
And our goal was to be, much more narrow, much deeper. And so we started off by focusing on Inglewood and the surrounding neighborhoods, making sure that if we were going to go make that investment in the stadium, from a jobs perspective, from an economy perspective, that we were also being part of the community everywhere people turned. And that certainly came through our partnership with the Watts Rams, which is an amazing youth football program led by LAPD officers in Watts, a great example of community policing and bringing police officers in the community together. People may forget now they were the Watts Bears when we showed up.
Oh, right.
We got them to change their name to the Watts Rams, and I think that's been one of the most successful programs we've done. They've been featured on Nike and NFL commercials worldwide, attended the Super Bowl. It's been great to see the development of that program. Look at our efforts in City Year in partnership for LA schools throughout South LA and East LA, trying to help raise educational standards. Our work with the United Way around homelessness. What I think it all comes down to, though, at the end is, trying to lift up those Angelinos who are most in need. And when you start to connect the threads of homelessness, social injustice, economic injustice, educational injustice, they all wind up being in the same vicious cycle. And, certainly one of the things that we did when we came back is one of the first meetings we took was with the United Way and efforts around homelessness. And it's a really thorny issue. It's been a thorny issue since I was growing up here, and certainly has reached new heights in the past many years, and exacerbated by the pandemic. But we wanted to be an organization that tackled the most important issues in Los Angeles and tried to help in any ways we could and get into the root causes that affect homelessness, which start really on the educational, and economic fronts. Certainly we can get into the discussions about affordable housing and the work that needs to be done there throughout our city. But ultimately it was investing in the communities, making sure there were jobs, resources, and that everywhere we showed up, people saw the Los Angeles Rams, whether it was a place called home, in Watts or Grape Street Elementary or any of the schools, in Inglewood, the St. Joseph Center. We wanted to become known in the community for being everywhere people needed help. So that it wasn't just, they're the Rams, they're building a stadium, it's $5 billion of investment into, a stadium for a place that we may or may not be able to go. But truly, the Rams are with me every day in my journey to be a better Los Angeles. And I think once, we landed upon that strategy, I think we've been able to execute it well, but the need in Los Angeles will never go away. And as you start to spread that into East LA, when you look at the efforts we're making out in the San Fernando Valley, where we're hopeful to build a headquarters in Warner Center, in the coming decade, this is a city of great opportunity, but also great need. And, the better we can perform in helping those in need, the more it attracts interest and the greater chance we have to be able to go and impact more people.
No, that's amazing. So, Kevin, 6 years back in Los Angeles now, somebody who grew up here, but you've had the opportunity to really serve in high levels of sports management and leadership in other cities, including Tampa Bay and St. Louis. Give me your thoughts on LA as a sports community and how it's evolved. And can you speak to the Rams' place in finding its place in this very crowded sports field, whether it's the Dodgers, Lakers that you referenced earlier, or USC and UCLA?
Well, look, Los Angeles is a unique sports market, unlike any, certainly in North America. When you talk about 12 professional sports teams, 2 major universities, the 5 major sports league all have 2 teams here. When you look at, NBA, NHL, Major League Baseball, Major League Soccer, and the NFL. Then you get into, the Sparks. Angel City has done an amazing job breaking in on the women's soccer front. Then you start to get into UCLA and USC,
right?
And you're really one of the only major, I would say, population centers in the country that has 2 major Power 5 teams, in conferences. We can get into the Pac-12, Big Ten discussion
right.
At a later time. But UCLA and USC obviously take a huge swath of the sports, attention as well. So you're really at 14 major competitors.
Right.
When you look at the world, along with the beach, hiking, Universal Studios, Disneyland, Knott's Berry Farm, you name it, this city has it. So it is an unbelievable competitive marketplace. But I also think it's one of those that has such amazing talent and the people who play for the teams. Obviously great. The history of championships, even in the past decade, the Dodgers, the Sparks, the Lakers, the Kings, the Rams have all won, titles in their sport. The Galaxy have as well, I believe. So it's one that pushes each other. And I think the thing coming back from my perspective is you can learn so much from the other teams here. The Lakers have, Showtime Lakers, an unbelievable connection, I would say with the Inglewood community, with South LA, from their time at the Forum, and then what they've grown with around their brand. The Dodgers, one of the largest multicultural fan bases anywhere in the world, consistently drawing 3 million people. And I remember growing up in Fernando Mania and watching all of that, but then, Hideo Nomo and Chan Ho Park and, how they captivated the Asian American community in the late 80s, early 90s with some of their players. And, just the passion and the fervor people have for Dodgers baseball. The Kings, an amazingly passionate season ticket holder base. It may not be as big as some of the others given hockey, but, Los Angeles Kings season ticket holders, some of the best fans that exist. LAFC has done an amazing job of building up a brand and a new brand downtown in a new stadium, connecting kind of with what I would say, more urban, gritty LA. Angel City connecting with women's sports along with the Sparks, and you get into the Galaxy and what they've been able to do in the South Bay and building a base there. I think the Clippers have done an amazing job with their community efforts and what Steve Ballmer, and Gillian have done and trying to build a brand separate from the Lakers. There's so much to learn from all of our sports partners that I think when you come back in 2016, you're trying to take bits and pieces of learning from each and try to weave it into your own tapestry, in a unique way that's the Los Angeles Rams. And we're so fortunate to have the power of the NFL, the preeminent sports league in North America and probably the world. behind us, an amazing stadium, the best new venue in the world, and to try to bring the Rams brand to life through all of that. But you are trying to learn bits and pieces. We have great dialogue amongst all of our teams. And I think you can even look at something like the Alliance, which is all the teams during the pandemic and, the challenging, social justice issues of 2020 coming to form the Alliance with every team head and every owner part of that to help, Renata Simmerl and LA 84 and play equity and, making sure that every kid had a chance after school to go play sports and be part of something and grow and chase their passions. So it's an amazing sports tapestry. It is competitive. I think you raise the bar. And I remember, we go out and I want to say it was 2017, 2018, we make trades for Sammy Watkins and Brandon Cooks and acquire up Jared Goff. And then the Lakers go and get LeBron. The Dodgers go out and get Manny Machado.
Right.
The Clippers go out and get, a Kawhi Leonard. And you felt, over and over again that everybody was trying to one-up each other. And then we go and make more trades. We trade for Stafford. The Dodgers trade for Mookie Betts and Max Scherzer. And, the Lakers do Anthony Davis. And you would always sit there and be like, this is just an arms race that you've never seen. But really good friends throughout the other organizations. I think we all compete, for fans. But the great part about Southern California is it is a large enough market for everybody to succeed.
Absolutely.
And I think there's a spirit of camaraderie amongst these teams that I would say I haven't seen in my previous stops in cities where maybe the pie, everybody's fighting for their share of the pie here, where here in Los Angeles, new teams come in, the Rams, the Chargers, Angel City, LAFC, and the pie just grows and you create a different pie and a new pie. And I think that's what makes this an unbelievable sports market to be a participant in.
Well, certainly, I appreciate that, Kevin, because certainly, as a resident and as a consumer of sports, one who older than you grew up in New York City, I just remember the epic battles between the Knicks and the Lakers from the 70s, the great battles between the Yankees and the Dodgers, and I am secretly hoping for a Dodgers-Mets face-off in the National League Championships and hoping for a Yankees-Dodgers World Series. That would make me very, very happy.
One of the interesting things you talk about New York, and you think about places that have multiple teams, whether it be New York, Chicago, San Francisco. The interesting thing about most of those teams over history is fandom along those is along geographic, kind of in socioeconomic lines. And that is not as true in Los Angeles. And you have, teams that came back at different points, played in the same venues. So if you look at, I was about to say Staples Center, Crypto.com Arena.
Exactly.
Has the Lakers, the Clippers, and the Kings, right? So you have two teams who compete in the same league playing in the same building. Then you get to LAFC and LA Galaxy probably 10 miles apart. When you get to us and the Chargers playing in the same building, you get a little bit the Kings and the Ducks, the Dodgers, and the Angels, Orange County to LA, but UCLA and USC probably separated by 8 miles, down the 10. So, I think when you get to it, one of the unique things about Los Angeles is unlike, New York, where you're a Yankees or Mets fan based on probably where you grew up. Rangers or Islanders a little bit based on the same, or Chicago, North Side, South Side, the Bay Area, San Francisco, Oakland. Los Angeles is very different in that regard, in the sense of, these teams do truly bring all Angelinos together, and you are fighting for someone who lives in the same household who has a lot of choices, and you can get some split households. But I do think that is one of the great challenges for us is everybody here is a potential fan. And when you wake up each day, we have, I think our avid fan base in Southern California has doubled or tripled since we arrived. But you're still at basically, a couple million people out of a 20 million person region, especially now with no NFL team in San Diego. There's so much opportunity from, if you really look from Santa Barbara down to the border, to keep growing and to keep, finding new fans. That challenge is fantastic each day.
Excellent. So you've accomplished a lot in 6 years, only 6 short years. So with that, you've been Executive of the Year for the NFL. What's next for you? What's next for the Rams? And what can we expect from the 2022 season, which kicks off September 8th?
Look, I think we need another 6 years like the last 6 years. And then we need another 12 years like those 12 years. And then I think you'll start to feel like maybe the work is done. And, one of the things when we came back in 2016, I always told our staff was our sole focus is when they write the article in 2026, did the NFL get it right choosing the Rams, Hollywood Park, SoFi Stadium? That answer has to be a resounding yes. And we're still 5 seasons, essentially 4 or 5 seasons away from that landmark. So there's a lot of work to do. And I can look back at last year, unbelievable attendance, sold out SoFi Stadium every game. But I think you can be honest with yourself and look at Week 18 against the San Francisco 49ers and see, 60% red in the building and say, we have work to do.
Sure.
And anytime you want to get excited about winning the Super Bowl, having a great record, attendance at SoFi Stadium, you just need to picture that game in your head and think about, okay, how do we turn that stadium blue? And you think about, and I as much as it pains me growing up, not liking the 49ers, being a rival, their success over many decades,
right,
leads to that. And I think if you're looking at building great teams, it is not winning a Super Bowl, it's winning multiple Super Bowls. It's multiple championships. The Dodgers and Lakers weren't built on, we won one championship and rest our laurels. It's years and years and decades of success. And so I think for us, I believe where we're at now after 6 years, we haven't climbed the mountain. We're just at base camp, and this should be the new high. This should be, the new place from where we start. We have an unbelievable opportunity in front of us, whether it's 2022, and the season in front, to go have a chance to repeat and become really the first team in nearly 2 decades to do that. But it's also, we've been to 2 Super Bowls in 4 years. Really, only the Patriots and Steelers have been to 3, since the turn of the century. So how do we get to go join that pantheon, of teams by getting to another one? How do we redefine ourselves over and over again in the community, on the field, in business, in partnership, and develop a fan base that is loyal, not just because we're winning, because we've won consistently. We've built those relationships. And I think one of the things that made me most excited last year when we won the Super Bowl was people weren't just excited that we won the game and we did it in our own city. They liked who we were as an organization. They liked our efforts in the community. Our corporate partners liked the way we work with them and activate throughout the city. Our season ticket holders were proud to be part of our organization. And I think that's what you want to build, long term. What's next is, you want to go repeat on the field, but you want to continue to build this organization in a meaningful way that makes Angelenos proud. And you talk about the things you can borrow from the other organizations, but coming back with SoFi Stadium, with Inglewood, we have a chance to be the modern day Los Angeles team and to write that story. The Dodgers and Lakers have an unbelievable rich history, as do we. But, people ask me all the time, well, teams don't need to rebrand or do this that are legendary. The Lakers, the Dodgers, the Red Sox, Yankees. And the answer to that is sure, but none of those teams left and came back.
Right.
We're really the first sports team in history to leave a city and then come back and try to figure out that path. And, we can never underestimate the amount of damage that was done in those 2 decades without the NFL, in Los Angeles for Rams fandom, not necessarily for NFL fandom, for Rams fandom. And so it's going to be a decades-long journey to go build that. And so I think, continuing to invest in the community, in our people, on the field, making sure, we keep someone like Sean McVay happy and grow him. That's going to be what defines our success for the next few decades. And, hopefully, when you have the 750th episode of CivitasLA, we can look back and say, okay, the Rams were a success.
We look forward to that day. Well, I know the kickoff is September 8th, Thursday Night Football, and I believe the stadium officially opened September 8, 2020. So congratulations on 2 years. But I've had the chance to visit as part of a Hollywood Chamber group, which went down to the stadium, which was a lovely tour, and it's a magnificent arena. So I want to offer our listeners, since we have listeners in 44 states around the country and 48 countries around the world, to get a lightning round of some of your favorite spots within this amazing arena. Are you ready for this?
Absolutely.
I read where you talked a lot about the fan experience, but also the culinary experience. So give us a favorite food item or food vendor within the stadium.
Favorite food item is the tsunami tots. So basically tater tots, Asian fried chicken tenders, Kewpie mayo, by far my favorite item in the stadium.
Oh my gosh. Best merch.
Anything with the Rams logo on it. So, right now I'd say you get a Cooper Cup Super Bowl jersey, the white one with Super Bowl patch, at the equipment store at SoFi Stadium, which is hard to find given supply chain issues worldwide. Okay. Favorite merch is Rams Super Bowl champion merch.
What about the CivitasLA tote bag?
A close second.
Okay, we appreciate that. Okay, so I understand the metro is coming down to Inglewood, but people still drive. Everybody wants to know, where do I park? Give us the best place to park.
The best place to park is to get parking on site. And when I remember, in the lead up to opening up the building, and, we opened in 2020 in COVID, so we had no fans for the first season. And, last year we had fans for, the first time, and people are like, well, what's the parking and traffic going to be like? I'm like, it's going to be a disaster.
Okay.
And,
Okay.
and everybody's kind of looked at me quizzically. I'm like, I'm just telling you the truth, right? Getting 70,000 people in and out of somewhere in Los Angeles at the same time is impossible. Right. And by the way, if I knew how to solve that, I wouldn't be wasting my time in the NFL. I'd be a traffic consultant,
Okay.
Making tens of millions of dollars in Los Angeles. But, look, I think the best place to park is at the stadium. I think one of the great things that will happen over time when you look at our development, people can come early and shop in the retail district, stay at the hotel, park on site. They can park what eventually will be, they can park at the Kia Forum, they can park at Intuit Dome. There are about 12,000 spots on site for people to tailgate. It's just when you have 70,000 people coming, it can be difficult when you get there late. The season ticket holders figured it out. I mean, game one last year was a real issue. By the end, people knew where to enter, what time to leave home, what time, the route to take.
Wow.
That has all gotten better. We will, we had 25% of our fans took Metro to the Coliseum.
That's great.
Back when we played at the Coliseum. And so, when you had 70,000 people there, you really were taking, close to 16, 17,000 people offline, through Metro. We haven't figured out how to do that yet at SoFi Stadium. It's going to be a while until that Metro extension comes in, to service our building, the Forum, and the Intuit Dome. People have found their way. I always say the great part about, Inglewood and Hollywood Park and the Forum is, for anybody who grew up here, before there was Waze, everybody had a back route to the Forum.
Right.
If you, in the 80s and 90s, you knew how to get to the Forum, whether you cut over La Brea or La Cienega, down Arbor Vitae, like everybody knew how to get there. The problem is now Waze tells you how to go on all those routes. So the secrets, don't exist anymore. And unfortunately, I would say, as much as Inglewood started to develop, the route along Prairie and Century hasn't necessarily caught up in terms of restaurants, experiences, parking. That will come in the coming years. It'll come on our land. So my goal someday is that people will be able to come, eat breakfast or stay late for dinner, skip the traffic one way in or one way out, and really be able to participate. But, even, we played this past Friday night, which was a rarity, but because we played, in preseason, traffic on the 405 at 5 o'clock at night going south is not pleasant.
It's not pleasant.
And so it was a tough entry gate. Fortunately on Sunday afternoon, Sunday mornings, the traffic isn't so bad. So, we try to avoid playing Thursday and Monday night games at SoFi, just because we know it's not great experience for our fans. And, we'll continue to get better and better, but it's a struggle.
Well, the answer here is come early and stay late. So 3.1 million square feet, 70,000 seats arena. Give us a hidden gem.
I would say that the hidden gem is, the stadium, because it's built 100 feet into the ground, but, has these, one of the things we took away in 2014, we took a tour of the old Hollywood Park and the grandstand, and we stood on top of the roof of the grandstand, which is basically the same height as SoFi Stadium is now. It had these unbelievable 360-degree panoramas of the city, and you could see the beach, Malibu and the Pacific Palisades, Santa Monica. You could see down to Palos Verdes, on a clear day down to Long Beach and the port. You could see the Hollywood sign in downtown, and that was one of the things we really wanted to preserve about, our location. So the hidden gem on level 8, which is the top level. If you stand in kind of Cedar Sinai Plaza and look out, you can see the beach, LAX, you can see Palos Verdes, you can see Long Beach. You get that great ocean breeze. You spin over to the other side, you're looking directly at the Forum, but you can see the mountains, Santa Monica, the Santa Monica Bay. You can see the Hollywood sign. You can see downtown on a clear day in the, close to the winter, you can see the snow on the mountains in the San Gabriel. So I would say being able to watch from up there and then turn around and look at, looking down in the bowl and seeing the action. The great thing about SoFi Stadium is it is the closest vertically of any stadium. So every seat in SoFi Stadium is closer to the field and its location than any comparable seat anywhere else, in the NFL. There is no bad seat in the house. And then you add in a 70,000 square foot 4K video board for people to watch the action on. But level 8 and seeing some of those, elements are the gems. I'd also say, not many people get a chance to stand at the 50-yard line, but when you're there and you can see the palm trees in the north end zone, not a lot of places where you can see palm trees.
Outstanding.
From the 50-yard line. But, and I think the one thing that people don't understand until you tour it, and so for your, 44 different states, for your 48 different countries, you can come to SoFi any day and take a guided tour through the building and be part of it. But, the one thing, and even Amazon did their first kind of test broadcast this past weekend, and it was Kirk Herbstreit, who calls college football for ESPN and now will do Thursday night for Amazon. He was in the building the first time, and he said, I didn't realize it's an outdoor stadium.
Right.
Everybody sees the roof that you fly over and that we put LEDs on, but there are no walls on the stadium. So it's an open air. You get breeze. On a warm day, it's warm. Cool day, it's cool. But most of the days in Inglewood, you get a nice 78, 79 degrees. And he was saying, this is an unbelievable environment because you're protected, but it's open air. Yeah. And I think that's the one thing people just, until you're in the stadium, you just never understand.
Well, A, level 8, we love that. And B, check out the Rams and get your guided tour. How do we steer people to get to a guided tour?
SoFiStadium.com, probably /tours, but there's a tours button to go register, and they run, throughout the weeks they run. If you come for a Rams game on Sunday, the tours run all through Saturday. So it's a great way to come experience our stadium even when we're not playing. Outstanding.
Kevin, this dialogue has been great, and we really appreciate your time, but we also appreciate what the Rams have done for this community in this short period of time. So, 6 years later, but welcome home. As we like to say on CivitasLA, the guest gets the final word. Any concluding thoughts or any calls to action that you'd like to share with our audience?
Look, I'm appreciative of the reception we've received in Los Angeles and the fandom. We just love seeing people at SoFi Stadium. We loved having 100,000 people come to training camp at UC Irvine. But I think for everybody who's watching our team, it is more than just the team you see on the field. And we're proud of Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp, Aaron Donald, Sean McVay. It is an unbelievable organization that pours its heart and soul into lifting up all Angelinos and giving you a great experience. And so, come interact with us any way you can, be it on television, at SoFi Stadium, at training camp at UC Irvine, at our community events, at Walk United at SoFi Stadium on November 12th. Any way you can get in the Rams ecosystem, we can't wait to see you.
Outstanding. Kevin, thank you for joining us. It's been wonderful to have you here as we celebrate the Rams Super Bowl championship, this launch of a new season, and our 75th episode. We wish you and the Rams every continued success, and we hope our listeners will tune in as the Rams make their bid to repeat as Super Bowl champions, taking on the Buffalo Bills on Thursday Night Football on Thursday, September 8th on NBC. And to our audience, thank you as always for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this program, and we hope you'll join us in 2 weeks as we look forward to launching our Hispanic Heritage Month Series 2022, which is generously supported by our friends at Vermont Slauson Economic Development Corporation and Arts for LA. So until we meet again, stay strong, get involved. To learn more about CivitasLA and share feedback on this program, or if you have a recommendation about future programs, please visit our website at www.civitasla.com and connect with us on Facebook at CivitasLA, Instagram at Civitas_LA, and Twitter at Civitas_LA.